order to install the black feather intake, you first need to remove the stock filter that came with your bike. You will need numerous tools, so after removing the bedpan chrome cover, next you will remove the stock paper air filter. Next you will remove the mounting plate for the filter with 3 screws, and it's held on very tightly with a rubber gasket around the butterfly valve, so you'll have to pull hard to get it off. Next you will want to remove 2 screws that are holding a mounting plate for the cool air intake coming into the back of the air filter. Now by depressing 2 tabs on the power connector to the butterfly valve, you can remove it. You will remove 4 bolts that holds the throttle body in place, holding it carefully as you take the last bolt out so you don't drop it and distort it. Tuck the cable and connector through a hole in the back of the mounting plate. This plate will now come off easily as you pull it off the cold air intake gasket and the rubber pollution control tube. Push the cable through the mounting bracket. Now you can remove this mounting bracket, or at least remove the bottom 2 screws. You'll need to raise the back of the tank in order to remove the cold air intake gasket. So loosen 2 screws that hold the back of the tank and carefully raise it up and place a wooden wedge underneath the back of the tank. If you're careful, you will not need to disconnect the fuel lines at all. With the tank lifted up, you'll be able to see 2 bolts holding on a metal bracket that mounts the rubber cold intake gasket. Once you get these 2 bolts out, you can wiggle and maneuver the rubber vent and the metal retaining bracket out from under the tank. Then you can put the tank back down in position and reattach the 2 bolts that hold it in place. Okay, next you're going to reinstall the metal gasket mounting plate, whatever the purpose of it is, I'm not sure. It's good to put 2 screws in just to kind of hold it in place, the screws that are going to mount the throttle body. Then install 3 of the 4 screws that came with the bike, leaving the lower right hand side missing, because we're going to use that for mounting the intake. You can use a manual to get torque numbers for each bolt, but I basically try to remember how hard it was to come off and tighten it about the same. In this case, they need to be fairly snug. Okay, now we're going to install the throttle body using the 4 bolts that came with it originally. I've sped it up a little bit not to bore you, but they go down pretty snug. Remember to keep the motor for the butterfly valve facing forward, as you can see in the video. Once you get those 4 bolts all snugged down, then you reattach the cable that runs the throttle body motor, and it just snaps in place, leaving the cable out of the way for the mounting plate for the intake. Thunderworks supplies you with a special plastic bracket that's held in place by 2 flathead screws that go into that metal gasket plate that goes behind the throttle body. Snug these screws down fairly good, and once you get them in place, you'll be ready to mount the back plate for the intake. The back mounting plate came with your bike. We're going to reuse it. And one of the 3 screw holes we're going to plug with a screw that we supply. It screws in very snugly, as you can see here in the video. And that just prevents any air from sneaking in under the filter lip. Now you want to press the pollution control tube onto the backing plate, press it over the throttle body. It's got a rubber gasket, so it's a little bit snug. Then there's two heavy threaded stainless steel screws that go into the plastic bracket we provided. And those two screws hold the backing plate in place very firmly. And finally, you take the K&N filter, which has the black feathers and the concho on it, and you use the 3 screws we supply to secure it onto the backing plate. Once those 3 screws are tightened down, they don't have to be real tight, you are ready to hit the road. A couple things about this setup, as you'll see as we pan around with the camera, is that the whole filter is tucked under the tank, so some people are concerned about rain getting into the filter. It's kind of difficult. You might get some road splatter, but remember the water is trying to penetrate through oil-soaked rags, so it's not that easy. And otherwise the tank basically covers the filter, keeps any rain from falling down into it. This filter setup actually protrudes outward less than the stock intake that comes with the bike. So it allows you to bring your knees in closer to the bike without pressing against the filter. You now have one of the largest and most free-breathing filters available for the Indian Thunderstroke engine, and it's sucking in cooler air than what comes stocked with the bike. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoy the ride.